So yeah, I wanted to talk through the work that I've been doing on accessibility in Phorest. So okay, so most of you today will probably know who I am. I'm Linds, and I'm a front-end developer. I work on the consultations team at Phorest, and I live in Grand Canal Dock, Dublin, with my wife Rachel, our tw 2-year-old twins, Cloud and Rex, and our two cats, Tuna and Salmon. That's a little family portrait that was illustrated by a Dublin artist called Lisa McHugo. And then below that, you'll see the forest of red lit poles, which is known as the Light Forest installation at Grand Canal Square. It's one of the many but popular Pokemon gyms in the area. So if anyone's into Pokemon, I live in a great area for Pokemon Go. So I joined Phorest in 2019 as a support agent, and over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to explore, learn, and eventually move into software development. I initially worked as an associate developer on a team where I was expected to contribute across the full stack, which was a great opportunity to figure out what I really enjoyed and what I definitely didn't. It quickly became clear that the back end wasn't for me, and I felt more comfortable working on the front end, especially when I was working with Ember. So why Ember? What initially drew me to Ember was strong conventions and clear structure. Everything felt purposeful and well organized. Uh, but what really set it apart for me was the strong sense of community that surrounds it. The collaborative spirit was clear to me straight away, even just within Phorest. You can see there a team picture of all the Ember folks in Phorest. So there's a whole lot of us. And that feeling was even before I'd met anyone in the broader Ember ecosystem. Something that changed last year when I attended Emberfest, and I saw the same energy echoed across the wider community. So anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about today was web accessibility and my journey through it, where it started, how it's grown, and things that I've learned along the way. So, as I mentioned already, I'm a parent of twins, and in early 2024, I had the privilege of taking 7 weeks of parental leave to care for them. We did a lot of exploring together. Every outing with a large double buggy was an adventure, but it wasn't always the fun kind. Quickly realized that the world wasn't built with our buggy in mind. So, like broken lifts made whole floors and shops inaccessible, narrow doorways or missing ramps meant I couldn't get in places. So it turned everyday errands into obstacle courses. That small experience really did stick with me. It was a small but very powerful window into what day-to-day life can be like when the world isn't built with you in mind. And it made me start to think about things that I potentially overlook in my work. And it was the first time that I truly considered that the apps that I was helping build might be just as difficult to navigate for some people as those shops and footpaths had been for us. So when I returned from my leave, I had the opportunity to move teams and work solely as a front end Ember dev, which meant I was able to finally focus on the part of development I'm most drawn to. As part of the sprint cycles on the new team, we have wiggle weeks, so time set aside to explore something we're curious about or personally invested in. Obviously, accessibility was what naturally appealed to me. I'd also recently completed a module in my front end course, which gave me a good starting point. So from there, I started digging in, looking around at how the other teams in Phorest were approaching it and trying to get a sense of where we were at. That's when I came across the Fine Ember accessibility testing plugin, which was already set up in our main front end app. The team that were using it had set up a custom helper file to temporarily exclude known violations, allowing the plugin to run without blocking every test. So I began with familiarizing myself with how it worked, how the rules were structured, and how the patterns it was designed to catch. Installation came, of course, with the usual round of dependency headaches, but we eventually found a version that worked well with the rest of the stack. And it felt like a good starting point until I ran the tests. And I ran the tests, and 225 out of 327 failed. And I had a wave of panic, and I felt totally out of my depth. And I wasn't sure where to start. And I started to wonder, had I made a big mistake trying to take this on? So like each test failure felt like a little reminder of something we hadn't thought about or hadn't prioritized. And it wasn't that we didn't care. Like accessibility just hadn't been treated as a first-class concern, and now I had evidence. Uh, I remember at the time having a one-to-one with our lovely director of engineering, who's here, Aoife, who was my manager at the time, and telling her I didn't even know where to start. She told me very calmly to just tackle them one at a time. And I know that that sounds like super simple, but at the time it was exactly the advice that I needed. It was a clear, manageable way to move forward when I felt totally stuck. So then I began with breaking down the mountain. I started by creating a Jira story with a child task for each of the rules I wanted to remove, and basically my own little checklist. I prioritized the rules based on my initial uh, idea of the impact and complexity, which helped turn what I felt like a mountain of work into something a little bit more manageable. It was just a little to-do list that I could chip away at. And from there, I put together my own custom setup file for Ember accessibility testing, where I allowed certain rules as temporary exceptions. This was the starting point, stop things from getting worse by blocking new violations, and then work through the existing ones one rule at a time. Once that was in place, I updated our existing Circle CI workflow to run the plugin on every code push. So from that point on, accessibility tests became a regular part of the development process. So the first rule that I removed was the ARIA command. And honestly, that one was probably the worst one to start with because it gave me a false sense of how easy it was going to be. Uh, if anyone that doesn't know, the rule ensures the elements with ARIA role command, like buttons or menu items, have accessible names so screen readers can announce them properly. Most of those violations were pretty straightforward. I just had to add some dynamic ARIA labels to a few components. That was about as complex as it got. And at the time I thought, okay, so it won't be so bad. Yes, spoiler alert, they weren't all that easy. So then the next rule I tackled was the button name, which again sounded simple enough, but I quickly ran into some frustrations, especially given the nature of the stack. So for anyone that doesn't know, this rule checks that every interactive button has an accessible name, something screen readers can announce so that so users know the button does what the button does. That name can come from visible text, an ARIA label, or an associated label element. One of the violation error messages was really vague. You can see it there at the top. Uh, it wasn't, and the issue itself wasn't even coming from the app that I was actively working on. It was coming from a shared renderer package that we use. So it was powerful in the sense that it could tell me something was wrong, but it couldn't tell me what or where in this instance. But fortunately, I was able to go through it. Obviously this pause test, and I was able to find the problem in the renderer, and then I could switch context. I could go to the renderer, make the fix there, publish a new version, and then upgrade the package in our app before I could confirm the issue was resolved. It was at that point that I realized that the accessibility work that I was doing was going to often mean looking beyond my own code. And obviously then I met some bottlenecks. Because I only had 1 week and 7 to focus on the work, the extra steps, fixing issues in another package, waiting on reviews and upgrading the versions, it made the progress a lot slower than I'd hoped. I was starting to feel a little bit stuck. So I paused to reassess and I thought I'll run the tests and see where I'm at. And when I ran the tests to get a clearer picture, the result was 302 out of 410 tests failed. And my jaw dropped. I was like, what is happening? It was way more than before, which really threw me. I'd already removed 2 rules, and I was expecting the failures to drop, not rise. And it felt like I was going backwards. But I just took a step back and I looked closer, and it actually did make sense. The code base had grown massively in that time, and so had the number of tests. With more components, pages, and flows been added, there was naturally going to be more violations, especially from rules that hadn't been prioritized yet. So that increase wasn't actually a sign of failure. It was a reflection of just the broader coverage. So one edge case that kind of stood out to me was when the linter rules and accessibility needs clashed. I needed to label range input for the opacity slider there, but the lint ruler didn't allow for the setup that I had in mind. So I tried using the ARIA label and the ARIA label by referencing the nearby heading to make the connection for the screen readers. And functionally, it did work. It was screen reader friendly and it validated the experience, but the accessibility test failed. So in the end, I just disabled that linter rule for that one case, which I know isn't a flawless solution, but it was the most accessible one given my constraints. And it was also a good reminder that the accessibility work isn't always black and white. Sometimes it's about making informed, practical trade-offs. Some of the rules were just impossible to resolve. Like take image alt, for example. This rule ensures that all images have descriptive alternative text, which is essential for screen readers to understand what's being shown. In our case, the app allows users to upload their own images, but there's currently no field for them to add the alt text. The issue wasn't within the images themselves, but with the lack of mechanism for the users to provide that description in the first place. So while the test could flag the violation accurately, there wasn't anything I could do purely at the development level. No amount of refactoring or ARIA attributes would solve the absence of a required input. So this in particular was a clear example of a design level accessibility blocker and a reminder that some problems just can't be solved in code alone. So this was what actually prompted me to loop in with our product designer, Ella. So when I met up with Ella and I shared what I was working on and the blockers I was running into, she was completely on board and she loved the idea. As a result of our conversation, she's committed to creating an accessibility checklist in Figma, which she plans to share across the wider design team. And she plans to present two versions of each flow during our team planning. So there will be a standard version and accessibility conscious one, which you can see at the bottom right there. It's a small shift in process, but a significant step toward building with inclusion in mind from the very, very beginning. While I've been doing this work, I also brought up the idea of making accessibility awareness one of our focus areas in the diversity in tech group at Phorest, which I'm also part of. The suggestion was really well received and it sparked some great conversations across the company. Since then, we've had people from different teams exploring tools, sharing learnings, and doing spikes on various approaches. So it's kind of created this ripple effect where accessibility is more becoming more visible, not just in code, but also in the culture. And there's some of the examples of the tools that we worked on. So yeah, I'm still chipping away. I would love to be able to show you a satisfying graph of how the failure count dropped. And while that is something that I care deeply about, the real win has been the shift in how our team thinks about and prioritizes accessibility. So we're not just fixing issues, we're asking better questions, catching things earlier, and designing with inclusion in mind from the very start. Uh, I'm still working through the list, and I've come to accept that I may never get all the test failures down to zero, but I've also made peace with it. That's okay. This was the first project I truly owned, and the progress I've made has given me a real sense of accomplishment, not just in the code, but in how it's shaped our culture. So if I could go back and say one thing to that poor, frustrated version of myself staring at all those tests, it would be breathe. You can do it, just not all at once. Imperfect progress is still progress. Thank you.